Well, good afternoon. I'm Joe Wainz, president of TurtleWorks, a company that helps businesses work successfully with Microsoft 365. And today I'm excited because I have the distinguished honor of talking with Jeff Jermyn about BlueBrier and what it is they do. It's sort of a fascinating type of business. And I want to give Jeff a chance to really share how he helps companies um, take advantage of those old IT assets. So welcome, Jeff.
Oh, thank you for having me, Joe. This is fun.
Yeah. So I like to help clients discover the tools inside Microsoft 365 because they're not aware of what's there. And often some questions that I'll ask them will get the conversation started, and they'll realize that hey, they're using Excel in a way that's sort of abusive, and there's tools inside like SharePoint or Teams that may do a better job. And those questions really drive engagement with them and help them come to terms with and understand the benefits that are inside of Microsoft 365. BlueBrier does something very similar, except it's with their old IT equipment. And I'm thinking if you could do like I'll say a 60-second, 30-second, just sort of high level. I want people to understand a little bit about what I want to place all of this in context. So, what does BlueBrier do from a very high level?
Yeah, no problem. And it's very aligned with what you're talking about. It's about productivity. We, as you said, we help other companies manage this IT world that's seeping in around us. And in particular, we help them with the retirement phase of IT hardware. And IT hardware may just look like hardware, but it's loaded with information, which is what the purpose of this whole technology realm we've created is about. So we do two basic things. First thing is we erase all the information so that when you're retiring and moving along your IT equipment, you're not passing along information and making yourself vulnerable to people and your privacy. And then the next thing that we do is we try and find a new home for that by reselling it into the marketplace. And from those proceeds, what we're able to do is get our clients back some of the capital that's invested. It's no different than when you trade your car in. You don't just give it away or you don't just throw it away. You trade it in so you can recover capital, put it to work.
There we go. So you help them find the worth that they have from a dollars and data perspective is really what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you know, there's misunderstanding from certain people, and this will depend on the business size typically, but what it is that they should be doing, what it is they are doing with those old assets. So, if you ask somebody what are they doing with their old computer equipment, what are some of the fun answers you get?
Well, it is because it's opening up something that we don't really fully appreciate all the time, and it's a responsibility that's been created. But common answers are, I don't know. I think we store it. I think we recycle it, but I'm not exactly sure where it goes. And when I get specific into the information, that's where, sometimes people don't have a lot to say because they really don't know.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean a lot of people have really good solutions, but it's something that's very, very easy to overlook. And the worst answer is, that's okay. I've got nothing to worry about. I've got nothing to hide.
Sure.
That answer doesn't stay the same after something bad happens.
So I don't want to steal your thunder, Jeff, but I'm just thinking, what is the worst that can happen? I don't have anything to hide. Well, you kind of do. I'm thinking of a MacGyver episode I watched where these hackers found a drive, and the next thing you know, MacGyver and the crew are going off to, some other continent to deal with people who stole something, and yada yada yada. So it's kind of exciting and romantic, but you really don't want that to happen. So uh, I guess flesh that out.
Yeah.
Tell me what people think they're doing that's correct, and what's wrong with that, and then what they really, or what it is that you do that really takes that erasure to the place where it needs to be.
Yeah. So it's a good question. And what happens with a lot of our initial clients, it's not everybody, but people believe they have nothing to hide. And they say there's really nothing here, or I've got I'm encrypted. I don't need to worry about information that may be stored there, may be passed along. The worst thing that can happen is, and it's not hard to fathom. Worst thing that can happen is somebody can get access to your information. If you think about what's on your computer, all of your emails aren't good news. Your W-2s may be in there, tax returns, your payroll may be in there. And when those kind of things happen, you have to come clean and explain potentially to your clients or your network that I've had a leak, I've had a breach. To take it up one notch, there are companies that are written about and that we hear about that come into work Tuesday morning after the long weekend, only to find that their network isn't working. So you call IT and say, "Oh, can somebody please fix the network?" IT is working on it, but what's happened is the network's been taken hostage and it's being held for ransom. And you pay an enormous amount of money to get your network back. You don't really know if you get your information back. And the other thing that can sometimes be discovered as the world evolves is that the insurance you thought you had, because you don't have a process for destroying information and retiring your assets to protect privacy, may be undermined or compromised.
Mm-hmm. Let me interrupt there. So that's very true. That's a thing today that didn't occur a few years ago. A few years ago, you had cybersecurity insurance, and you were in pretty good shape. And now that the insurance companies have been hammered so much by these ransomware and other attacks, they're starting to read the details of their policy and holding you to it. So if you don't have, a written information security policy and you're not following it, your policy may be worthless. You may be paying every year, but it's not going to hold up when you need to file a claim. So that needs to be considered. And I think what you do, Jeff, as far as dealing with drives and data, helps to cross that T or dot that I regarding the policy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what it is. And if you look at those policies, Joe, a few years back, maybe a decade ago, that policy was a small paragraph in maybe your umbrella policy or something like that. If you go in and explore that, it's a very dynamic document. It's turned into multiple pages and even a section unto itself about cybersecurity. And the thing that we're providing clients is it's a process to take care of that. So it's something that you don't have to do. We do it for you. And at the end of that process, you don't get a promise all your information is gone. You get evidence that it's been destroyed to the appropriate standards for your industry. It might be HIPAA, it might be GDPR, it might be FERPA, depending on what industry you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Have that evidence. Basically, what you're able to demonstrate is, look, my vaults are empty. The things that were stolen in my retired assets weren't there.
Mm-hmm. So you have a really solid process from the moment equipment leaves the building to the point that you're shipping it off to whomever bought the old equipment. Can you touch on chain of custody? Can you touch on audit? Can you touch on you mentioned HIPAA and whatever. If there's other areas within there that are useful to talk about, add those as well.
Yeah. The way it all begins is we ask a few questions to a client. We develop a custom process to service them. And some of the foundational elements of any process is what you explained. Joe, it all starts with us going to collect assets from a client's location. And when we do that, because the assets that contain information are moving from one location to another, we do that with a secure chain of custody. And we all come from automotive, so secure process control is the only thing that we really understand. So when we collect those assets, they're counted and contained in a sealed truck. There's a transponder with the assets, so the client can follow that on their smartphones to see where the transponder is moving. And it's a direct ship here. And then it's when it's received, it's the date stamped photos of the seals are connected to the transponder's movement. And it provides a very evidentiary-based report that explains that the assets have been moved from one location to another. Then when we get into that, we don't process 3,000 pounds of equipment. We give you a specific quantity and classification. So there were this many laptops, this many servers, this many switches. They contained a specific number of drives. And when it goes through our process, it's not, we do hundreds of devices at a time. And when we're erasing those, they're randomly selected by a third party that audits our process and audits the outcome of that. We've never had a device that contained any remnant of information identified in our validation process.
I want to interrupt. So you brought up a good point about the fact that you don't deal with IT equipment in a pounds perspective. You deal with it in an item or serial number perspective.
Right.
And I want to say Ice Mountain, but I know that's wrong. The big one that will come and take your old equipment away, and a lot of these computer scrap companies deal with your equipment in a pounds perspective. So how many laptops is in 100 pounds? You don't really know, and they don't really know. So you don't have that real understanding, that real audit trail indicating that, yeah, this laptop left my building. It ended up at so and so's scrapyard, and everything is taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. Whereas you're dealing with it on a serial number perspective, which means that every piece of equipment is accounted for.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's just like a MacGyver episode, Joe. It's romantic and
Here we go. So, you know what, Jeff? My people just format the drive. It's all good. We get a new laptop. They take their old one and they just format the drive. Everything is square. I don't need you.
Yeah. No, and we get that occasionally, and we encourage people. We're not trying to get everybody's business and whatnot. We're trying to change things and help people. Occasionally, we'll take those assets and say, let us test them. Let us see if we can recover any information. And with their consent, we'll take a look. We don't look at the files, but we'll just explain we could recover these files. We show them how that can potentially happen. And there's vulnerabilities on top of vulnerabilities, and it can happen in a variety of ways. When you reformat a drive, you're really not clearing all the information. When you delete a file, you're not clearing all the information.
No.
And the other thing that happens too, any business that's out there, their business is not erasing drives and testing assets and making sure the information's gone. They've got other things to do, and they're obviously immersed in that, and they can get distracted from the task of data erasure. The vulnerabilities that I mentioned, you can miss one, or a computer has two drives. You thought it had one, or one slips through. And it's not uncommon to find a laptop. I don't want to scare anybody, but it's not uncommon to find a laptop with the password written on it somewhere, just as a reminder, because passwords get updated pretty regularly. And that just doesn't give me access to, or the bad guys access to what's on the computer. It could open up the network potentially, which creates a problem that gets almost incomprehensible.
Yeah, sure. So some of the other things we've talked about, you and I have talked regularly, is the environmental aspect of this whole thing, right? So the fact that I'll say conservation is going on, it's good for the environment. The fact that we're not just throwing all this stuff in a landfill. Do you have anything you can add to that?
Yeah. I've learned a lot in this about what sustainability is. And there's parts of sustainability that are captured by what we do. One part of sustainability is economic sustainability. So if you're a business and you're recovering that money, that capital, it's an economic gain for you, which is good. It helps you be a more competitive business, and it helps you get more of your capital. The second aspect of sustainability is social conscience, if you will. And if those assets are idle somewhere and not being used, those are natural resources and energy that's been spent by the people of this planet, if you will, to do nothing. And that goes into your productivity theme. If those assets aren't doing anything, that's waste. And it's better to find them an opportunity to be reused and repurposed for the benefit of others that technology may be slightly out of reach for. And then the final thing is, when these things do get old and beyond repair or beyond utilization anymore, because the times have passed it by, it can be recycled properly. that recovers a lot of the commodities, aluminum, copper, gold, silver, palladium, that are in these devices to be reused for other applications and whatnot. That's a lot easier than drilling a hole 4 miles into the earth to find some ore that you've got to convert. It's right here, so why not use it?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm just thinking about the dollar's perspective related to the data. So how much is that data worth? Um, if somebody gets a hold of it, they can exploit it to, one, take hostage of your network. In addition to just shutting your business down until you get your network back up, you get backups from wherever and rebuild your servers and whatever it is you need to do.
Mhm.
Your reputation may have been tarnished or harmed because of that. Um, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, if you will, but it's just there is a reality that this stuff happens. There are people that get up in the morning, make their cup of coffee, and go to work and try to figure out how to steal stuff. you know, so making sure that your data is not just uh, deleted or reformatted the drive or whatever, but really making sure it's erased completely is a concern. I know we've talked in the past about some of these storage devices are so small now that unless you have shredders that are current, they may actually miss the drive as you're shredding equipment, and you still have that vulnerability there. You have anything to add to that?
Well, you asked what it's worth, and I think you sort of answered the question as well. It's really hard to put a dollar amount on that outcome and that consequence, but you touched on what's really important. Um, the way the laws are evolving, you have to disclose to anybody that's potentially affected by a data leak or a data breach what's happened. And that's the right thing to do. And we can all work together to try and manage that. But at the same time, it's hard to put a dollar amount on what will it cost me to buy my reputation back or to buy forgiveness or something like that. And it's not that that you're at fault or you're to blame and whatnot. But in this game that we're playing everywhere, it's important to not just say, hey, well, everybody gets breached, everybody has data leaks, it's okay, we'll just keep going on. It's better to take a little bit of effort, a little bit of action, and put a little bit of effort into trying to find a way to
Hmm.
extend that process, make it right.
For sure. So one of the things that I think about is Microsoft 365. That's my thing, and so people are like, "Oh, my data's in the cloud. I don't need to worry about it." Well, that's not the case. So if you're using Outlook, you're using the desktop application, you've got email files sitting local. Your PST and OST files are sitting local on that laptop, desktop, and those need to be addressed when you're retiring that asset. As well as if you're using the OneDrive sync client, you're synchronizing files back and forth, you pull the plug on that device, any files that were synced are still sitting on that laptop and need to be dealt with. So just because your data is in the cloud doesn't mean you're okay. It's you still need to work with a service like Jeff to deal with this stuff. Um, what does your average client look like, Jeff?
Um, Typically, if we're going to collect assets, we're looking for quantities minimum of 50, and that's not because we're trying to come up with a solution and an outcome that costs the client zero. So if we can get enough volume and enough quality of assets, so if you process it shortly after it retires and don't wait a long time and store it, we can get you to a situation where the service doesn't cost anything. And then going beyond that, we get into payout situations. So what happens is what we recover for the client is an amount that's in excess of our fees. So instead of an invoice, they get a credit memo and a check.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sweet spot for us because that builds the validity and reinforces the routine. So we become an extension of their operation to just, this is how we retire. We use BlueBrier to retire assets,
Mm-hmm.
security, and we get paid at the end of it. So it's pretty hard to resist.
So some payouts, like what's the biggest, what's the smallest, what's the average?
Um, well, I'll give you an example of like sometimes it does cost money because what you're sending us is too old, and that can be a few $1,000s. Sometimes when we first started doing this, we went to a data center and we're competing to win the client's business. Um, we quoted $1,000. We expected at a minimum they would get $1,000 check, and the next best bid was a charge of 25,000 to take the equipment
Mm.
out.
So your competitor wanted to charge 25 grand and you wanted to give the client $1,000 instead.
Yeah,
So
that's
in
what we
the end, they were ahead $26,000.
Yeah, they were very happy. But so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this a different way. The $25,000 company does what they do very, very well, but it's not the right application in the way that the technology's evolved and what's
Mhm.
available. And then some of our clients, we're writing checks with 6 digits before the decimal point. So it's 6 digit payouts on some of these things. And
I think we knew that it was before the decimal point, but thanks
I
for
just wanted
clarifying.
to make sure. But no, that's where it's going, and that's a pretty rewarding experience. And anytime that happens, it's pretty funny because um, they'll ask us, "Is this right?" And I'll say, "Yeah, that's really what it's worth." And we can take them through the details of why it's worth that much. And
Mhm.
then within a couple of weeks, we get another phone call. Hey, we found some more stuff. How soon can you be here?
You're looking for another 6-digit check.
Yeah.
Ah, what are some amazing uses of the old equipment that you've seen? I'm
Well,
guessing you've helped some schools out or something along those lines. But yeah, I'm just curious how some people are being creative with what it is that you're selling. And I think, when I saw your operation, there's a lot of just sort of nuts and bolts. Hey, we pull out processors, and there's a
yeah,
processor shortage, so people are buying those processors. We pull out RAM, and people are buying the RAM. Or, your every disk drive that's useful, that is reliable. I mean, you test that, right?
yeah.
But every reliable drive, whether it's solid state or something else, that goes up on the market as well. But what are some creative and interesting uses that you've seen?
Well, the when we started this business just in time for the pandemic, and in that episode, I did have the good fortune of meeting some school superintendents. One of which called and said, "Hey, can you get me 25,000 Chromebooks?" I said, "No, that's probably not going to happen." But we did help them. What the superintendent was looking for is because everybody was working from or being taught from home. He had a lot of households um, that had 2 students but only one computer, and
Ah,
you can't effectively teach 2 students on the same computer without
sure.
having um, you know a little war on your
Hmm.
hands. So we were able to get some computers into those households. That's pretty rewarding for us and for our clients. Um, the building that we're in here now, the custodian for this building had 2 students learning from home and 2 computers, but one was really old and she needed a new one. Came in, wanted to look at our inventory to see if she could find a computer. So we found her a computer, and it cost about 25% of what she thought it was going to cost. She got it home, and about an hour later, I got a call from her saying, "I need one more because the kids are fighting over the new computer now. So I just need to get to them."
Sure.
It's pretty cool when you help people. And then a lot of things, Joe, that we are so fortunate to take for granted where
Hmm.
we and where we are. We get into other parts of the world where there's a lot of really good people trying to do things that are meaningful, getting these computers into schools to help kids experience what the world is really like now. And access to technology for some schools in developing nations is a bit of a long shot right now, but we're closing that gap.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very nice.
Right.
All right, folks. So don't go away, because we've got some takeaways, some things you can try or be aware of, on your own, that you can try out. But how do people get a hold of you, Jeff? If somebody needs to contact BlueBrier or Jeff Jermyn, or they've got old stuff.
Yeah, there's my contact information up on the screen. Um, and All it takes is a call. You can send me an email, you can send me a call, but we set up like a brief call just to ask a little bit about what you're trying to do, and then we'll put a proposal, a solution together, and walk you through it slowly or get it done as quickly as you need. Our our real objective is to make this as convenient and rewarding as possible. So relieve your worries, and you don't have to do a whole lot.
Hmm. And to get a hold of me, so if you need to talk about Microsoft 365 or how do I leverage all the tools inside of there, or just want to have a conversation, there's my contact info, and you can hit that link, and that'll allow you to schedule an appointment right on my calendar. And roll from there. So, from a takeaways perspective, the first thing is formatting your drive is like ripping out the table of contents in a book. It didn't really remove the contents of the book, it just made it harder to find, but it's all still there. So, deleting all those files and formatting drive, you need to do better than that. And let me see. You got any takeaways, Jeff?
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is nothing when it comes to retiring your assets. You can store it and forget about it, but that's the worst thing you can do. Um, the hardest thing to do is to do everything yourself. But there are, if you're a small company, there's if you Google or look up on the internet various NIST approved data destruction applications, you can erase your hard drives and whatnot. So it is good if you're small and you want to take that into your own hands, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the easiest thing to do is pick up the phone, and there's a lot of resources in our community that we overlook and take for granted, just like what you do, Joe. It's easy to do that, and you find out what the opportunities are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, good stuff. Thanks for your time, Jeff. And I hope people got something useful out of it. I know that I've been fascinated by what you do. I've had a chance to see Jeff's operation and see how it rolls and how everything is controlled and secured and automated. As he's done a very nice job. So thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks for your time, Jeff. And we'll catch you later.
Thank you, Joe. This was fun. Take care.
All right. Bye now.